Hello, Terry Lynch here, medical doctor, accredited psychotherapist, best-selling mental health author, creator of mental health courses for mental health professionals and for the general public. It's been clear to me for several decades that, through no fault of their own, most, probably the vast majority, of psychologists, psychotherapists, counsellors, mental health professionals in general, simply do not understand depression. For mental health professionals such as psychotherapists, psychologists, counsellors, a major contributing factor to this problem is that within the majority of training courses, depression is largely accepted as a fundamentally medical problem, as espoused by the mental health wing of the medical profession. The assertions that are most associated with depression, that depression is a medical illness, a chemical imbalance, a genetic medical condition, and so on. These are generally not questioned, not critiqued to anything like what they should be within training courses for mental health professionals. In order to help therapists really understand what depression is, I'm in the process of creating a course to do just this. This course has 4 sections: a setting out of what the current paradigm of depression is, a detailed critique of this paradigm, a setting out of a trauma-informed and psychologically informed understanding of the experiences and behaviours that come to be described as depression, and the 4th section, working with people diagnosed with depression or people likely to be diagnosed with depression. Over the years, I've seen countless examples of the degree to which depression is misunderstood. In this presentation, I'm addressing one such example. The Midwest Recovery Centers in America. The primary focus of Midwest Recovery Centers is substance use disorder treatment. They're also involved in working with mental disorders. On their website, as of December 2025, they include an article entitled, "Can Depression Be Cured?" The article was clinically reviewed by Kevin O'Grady, Master of Science, Certified Reciprocal Alcohol and Drug Counsellor. Nothing I'm saying within this video is critical of either the author, the reviewer, or of Midwest Recovery Centers. My purpose here is to illustrate to you how pervasive misinformation on depression truly is. The key takeaways of this article included the following. Depression often functions as a long-term condition because of biological, genetic, and psychological factors that influence how symptoms develop, recur, and respond to treatment. To most people, this sentence reads properly, correctly. Nothing to see here, nothing wrong with this sentence whatsoever, most people might think. However, there are mistakes. The author writes, because of biological factors. The truth of the matter is, this is false information. The author writes that because of genetic factors that influence how symptoms develop, etc., this too is false information. Within the course that I'm creating for mental health professionals, therapists, psychotherapists, psychologists, I'm setting out in detail what depression is, and indeed, equally importantly, what depression is not. Within that course, I have audiovisual presentations on both the claimed biology of depression and the claimed genetic basis of depression. Each of these sections is about 2 hours long, within which I set out in considerable detail the truth about the so-called biology of depression, chemical imbalances, inflammation, and so on. These are matters that therapists are not trained in, that are not taught properly about. Psychological factors are also mentioned. The author writes that these 3, biological, genetic, and psychological factors, influence how symptoms develop, recur, and respond to treatment. But biological and genetic factors have never been verified to be present. In my course, I set this out precisely and in detail. It's important that therapists know the detail. Knowing the detail provides therapists with far more confidence in what they do and in their understanding of depression than when vague notions of genetic inheritance, chemical imbalance, etc., all of which have to, at some level, influence a therapist's degree of understanding of depression and their confidence and competence in working with people diagnosed with depression. Through no fault of their own here, these authors have made a false statement. The authors continue, depression is a psychiatric disorder. The primary symptoms that characterize depression are sadness, disinterest in activities, and hopelessness. I refer to this as the process of medicalization of understandable and appropriate human experiences and behaviors. The author states that these are symptoms, that sadness, disinterest, and hopelessness are symptoms of a psychiatric medical condition called depression. As I set out in detail on my course on depression, this is false information. These are not symptoms. They are experiences and behaviors appropriate to the person's situation, life experiences, contexts. Of course, this doesn't mean that people do not need help. However, declaring these to be symptoms wrongly medicalizes appropriate human feelings, behaviors, reactions, directing these people into the wrong channel, the primarily medical channel. And in the course, I will also be setting out what antidepressant medication truly is, what it does, the effects of it, including why some people describe antidepressants as helping them. The authors continue. Depression is typically viewed as a chronic condition, meaning that while it can't be cured necessarily, it can be treated and well managed to where your symptoms don't interfere with your life. So the phrase, it can't be cured. This is part of the current paradigm on depression. It's unfortunate and it's inaccurate, as I set out in detail within my course, but it is part of the belief system that forms the current dominant paradigm of depression. The authors then set out why depression is typically viewed as a chronic condition. We're now going to address the first two bullet points that the authors include to justify the claim that depression is a chronic disorder. The first one, depression is linked with changes in neural pathways and brain chemistry, contributing to its chronic nature. Most therapists reading this, most people reading this will conclude, yeah, that's what I've heard before, that sounds reasonable, sounds correct. The truth of the matter is that this is false information. The authors continue, when you have imbalances in neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, it's a factor in the development and persistence of symptoms of depression. Both of these unequivocally made statements are false. This is false information. The second bullet point that was used to justify the assertion that depression is a chronic disorder, there's evidence that shows genetics can influence how susceptible an individual is to depression. If there's a history of depression in your family, you could be at a higher risk of developing it yourself. Genetic factors may contribute to the chronic nature of depression. There's evidence that shows the role of genetics. There is no such verified evidence. And I set this out very clearly within 2 hours of audiovisual material that I have created in relation to the so-called genetics of depression. This is a false statement. So the first two bullet points included in this article on why depression should be considered to be a chronic disorder, the assertion that depression is linked to abnormalities in brain chemistry, and the assertion that genetics have been verified to play a significant part in susceptibility to depression. Brain chemistry, genetics. It seems to me that the majority of therapists reading this material would assume that this is correct. The fact of the matter is that neither of these sentences are correct. They constitute false information. Major gap in psychotherapeutic training, psychology training, within which medical assertions about depression are taken as gospel, are taken as correct unquestionably. This gap needs to be eliminated. Otherwise, the training of psychotherapists, psychologists, counselling has to be somewhat deficient. How can a therapist fully work with someone diagnosed with depression if the therapist doesn't fully understand what depression is and what it is not? If you would like to really understand depression, both what depression is and, equally importantly, what depression is not, check out my new course on depression for mental health professionals through the link below. Currently, there's an introductory discount applying to the course, as well as a 3-month no-quibble full refund facility. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.